our presentation, we'll talk about the importance of proper selection techniques, giving you everything you need to know from basic general knowledge all the way to some pro tips from our presenters. Hashtag pro tips. All right, a little short there. Is it broken or is this the longest 20 seconds of my life? Like, there's no way. What do I do? Like, the first one happened in 20 seconds, and the second one just didn't, so.
Is it only on the first?
I don't think it's applied to all.
How do I hit apply to all? Here.
Yeah, just go back to that, then hit Control A. I'll select them
I
all.
just want to start from the beginning. I can do those 2 slides again.
Yeah, we didn't have it on, so.
Really exciting. Thanks for your patience, guys. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon. We are Group 6 of Dr. Casper's.
Lovely.
Lovely.
Yes.
I'd go as far as to say beautiful.
Yeah.
Recruitment and selection class. We're going to be talking about the selection matrix and the decision process. All right. Our presentation will talk about the importance of proper selection and training. And we will give you everything you need to know from basic general knowledge all the way up to some pro tips from our presenters. Hashtag pro tip. All right, who we are. Look at this group of people.
I like it.
I'm Jacob Hasner. Call me Jake. We have Taylor, Rachel, John, and Eric over there. This is from our meeting, working on our presentation, obviously having a blast. All right, so I will briefly cover application forms, but first I want to introduce the 4 topics my teammates will be covering. Starting off with drug screens and references from Taylor, or we'll talk about what those guys in white coats take from you in this little bottle. All right, following that will be a selection matrix covered by John, right behind me. We'll talk about the different candidates and criteria you're going to want to use to compare your candidates. And then following the selection matrix, we will move on to the decision process covered by Eric. This will include 8 steps, going all the way from developing your purpose, all the way through evaluating your final decision so that you can make better decisions in the future. And then lastly, we will move on to the employment offer letter, which has standard information as well as contingencies. And that topic will be covered by Rachel. So now that you know what's going to be happening, I'll tell you a little bit about application forms. They look like this, or at least they used to when you used to get them on paper. Now most of them are done online. It is a form or a collection of forms for an individual seeking employment called an applicant. Must be filled out as part of the process of informing an employer of the applicant's availability. So a good one should have relevant information to gather on the applicant. Should be in a uniform format that allows the employers to easily compare applicants' qualifications. When you have a lot of applicants, it can be difficult to compare thousands or more. But beware. However, in the process of gathering this information, employers must be sure to avoid pre-employment inquiries that violate federal, state, and local fair employment laws. I'm going to discuss some of the federal laws with you. They just look like a bunch of letters and numbers right now, but I'll get into them. Title VII, the ADA, the ADEA, the GINA, and the FCRA. What are these letters? We will find out. Title VII, it prohibits against the Title VII Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a federal law that prohibits employers from discriminating against employees on the basis of sex, race, color, national origin, religion, etc. Next, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, starting in 1990, prohibits discrimination and ensures equal opportunity for persons with disabilities in employment, state and local government services, public accommodations, commercial facilities, and transportation. Next, the ADEA, the Age Discrimination Employment Act, is a federal law governing age discrimination. It was enacted in 1967 to promote the employment of older workers based on ability rather than just age. Next, we have the GINA, which stands for the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Starting in 2008, it is a federal law that protects individuals from genetic discrimination in health insurance and employment. Genetic discrimination is the misuse of this information. Lastly, I'll cover the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. This is a federal law that regulates how consumer reporting agencies use your information. It also limits access to your information and forces the disclosure of your credit file to you upon request. Moving on, the Ban the Box is a civil rights campaign, international, and it advocates for ex-offenders aimed at persuading employers to remove the box from their hiring applications that ask applicants if they have a criminal record. Here in New Jersey, there is we have what is called the Opportunity to Compete Act. It has been in effect since March 2015. And this law requires employers to delay criminal history inquiries until after the first interview, with exceptions to police and such things. Now I'm going to hand the baton over to Jonathan, who's going to talk to you about the selection matrix.
Hello everyone. Like Jake said, I'm going to be talking about the selection matrix. The first thing I want to talk about is how it's kind of a vague phrase, the selection matrix. It doesn't exactly explain to you what it is based off of just the name of it. So what I'm going to be talking about to start off is what it actually is, who uses it, and how it's actually used to determine who can be the best fit candidate for the job. So what it actually is it's a rating system used to compare candidates based on the criteria that's pre-chosen before they actually choose the candidates for the job. As they get the criteria and the numbers for each candidate, a final score will eventually determine the best option for who they should pick for the actual job. So who uses it? People that use it can be firm analysts, so people who actually determine the criteria, know what goes on behind the job analysis. People like that will be making the criteria and figuring out the numbers behind it. Other people that use it tend to be managers and hiring managers for the firm to figure out which person would be best for the job. So the first step is figuring out the criteria for the selection matrix. So the criteria itself should be key characteristics for the job that point out the most important aspects behind it to what makes someone successful in that specific job. So to get the criteria, they'll be basing off the job analysis, like I said before, with firm analysts. And they're going to be taking the driving factors of each job as to what each person should be doing and what managers should be looking for in each employee for when they hire them. So in other words, you're going to be looking for the most important aspects behind the job. But you should also keep in mind that you're not always going to be looking for the most important aspects as well as criteria that isn't necessarily required, but will in fact improve job performance. So what I mean by that is you're going to be weighting the criteria. So this means that you're going to give a level of importance to each criteria that is chosen for the candidates to be factored into. So you're going to want to keep the number of weighting factors small. Like I have a graph that's going to come up in a second here that's weighted 1 through 4. And basically, this just kind of gives you an idea, like the most important criteria for the job should be at weight 4, whereas the optional criteria should be at weight 1. This comes into play later on in my explanation, where I'm going to be bringing math into the equation. I know how much everyone loves math. So then what do? You choose the candidates that you're actually going to be choosing for the actual job. And that will fit the criteria that was pre-chosen. The number of candidates that you'll be choosing from is based on the number of spots open for the job or how many people apply. There's a lot of different factors that can factor into that. So once you actually get the candidates that you're going to be putting in the selection matrix, it's time to rate them. This is the first step in determining the best fit candidate for the job. So how you actually rate the candidates that are chosen is each criteria is going to be given a scale, generally 1 through 10, 1 being poor, 10 being excellent. And this is the first step in determining the candidate's score. Like I said before, we'll be taking the weighting factors into consideration again. And you're going to be rating them based on their level of qualification, their education, their skills and knowledge. So basically this allows for a wider comparison when you actually get the final statistics behind each candidate. Eventually you're going to get things called clusters in your statistical analysis. And this is okay. This happens in most cases. And that'll come into play in just a second as well. So using math. Basically it's not hard. So you're just taking the rating that you get from each candidate and you're multiplying it by the weighting factor that each criteria has. And this will get you a final score for each candidate. That final score will determine where they stand next to the other candidates. So, like I said, clusters will eventually start appearing. And this actually makes it easier for most analysts to determine who the best fit candidate should be. You'll be able to distinguish who the top candidates are between the middle candidates and the lower candidates. So what you do with those clusters is you want to get rid of the middle ones and the bottom ones because they're the people that aren't generally going to be performing in the job the best based on the criteria that you came up with. So this will leave about, you're ideally going to want like 2 candidates, maybe a little more, but realistically that's not generally going to happen every time. But it'll give you the top cluster of candidates that are left based on the final scores that you get from the weighting factors and the rating scores. So what you do after that is choosing the best fit candidate based on that top cluster of candidates. And really, how do you choose? You get like the scores, say 2 people have the same score, how do you choose which person should be performing? That seems kind of unfair. What they do is they go back to the interviews and they review the interviews, they see the behavioral aspects behind each candidate, and they're going to see based on those behaviors which person would perform best in the job based on the situations they're given and what their reactions to each situation is. So another way you can do that is, this is actually a really good way of finding the future performance, is looking at their past performance, so their past experience, their past accomplishments, their achievements, and through that comparison you'll be able to find out which candidate in that top cluster will benefit your company the most. So for my new and you, when I was hired at Philly Pretzel Factory, I went through a selection process where they asked me a bunch of questions, whether it was like, can I lift a 50-pound bag of flour? And all those questions that they asked me eventually led them to believe that I was the best fit candidate between the other people that were being asked the same questions. Now that I've been there for a while, I'm now a manager, and I actually have more power when it comes to how these criteria determine between all the different people that they bring in for employees. So I can tell my bosses, you should be looking for these kind of aspects in a potential employee rather than these kind of aspects, because that'll give you a better job performance. So up next, we're going to have Eric talking about the actual decision process.
Thank you, Ben. Like you said, I'm going to be covering the actual decision process. Of anything we do, right, it's always decisions. Whether we decide to get up in the morning, or stay in bed, or what we're going to put on to dress, or clothes, or eat. Everything we do is a decision. But in HR, it varies a little bit differently than putting on your clothes. You're trying to judge whether the decision is going to be good for the company. You have to gauge the pricing, whether they're all about profit, or are they more along the lines